And how was it that the Obama administration that started so poorly played such an important role? After all, his bad start included a lot of nasty things. The appointment of a very militaristic foreign policy team, no anti-war voices, the appointment of a very conservative economic team, with most of the leaders being those that were responsible for creating the crisis. His continuation of the one-sided approach to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, his willingness to justify war crimes conducted by Israel in Gaza, and to blame Hamas solely for the crisis. His escalation of the war in Afghanistan and sending a 50% increase in troop levels without even completing an assessment of what the mission was about. His continuation of the Bush policies in Pakistan. His acceptance of the war on terror as a metaphor and strategic framework for U.S. policy. His backtracking on his promise to review and renegotiate the North American Free Trade Agreement. His plans that announced the increase in the size of the U.S. Army and Marine Corps of almost 100,000 soldiers. His slowed timetable for the withdrawal of troops from Iraq and his leaving of residual forces there. You know, in the beginning, it seemed that Obama had almost no sense of how militarization and global overreach had undermined or could undermine any other progressive idea he had about the economy or responding to global warming. And he disappointed further with his continuation of Bush policy as allowing rendition of prisoners, warrantless wiretapping, and citing state secrets to enhance executive power. Finally, Obama was slow to understand his core challenge. Imperial decline was inevitable, but that it was also an opportunity. He needed to fundamentally change U.S. foreign policy, the U.S. role in the world. He needed to diminish U.S. military commitments and power. He needed to close many of the 750 permanent military bases outside of our borders. He needed to challenge the abuse of power of the military-industrial complex. He needed to promote peace conversion, to shift resources into fighting climate change, meeting healthcare needs, overcoming poverty, and other pressing needs. But in the beginning, he wasn't there, nor was the nation. Now, historians disagree on which factor or factors were most important in driving the changes in U.S. foreign policy that resulted in the Great Transformation. But they do agree that each of these was important. First and foremost, perhaps, the people grew tired of a politics of fear, tired of the manipulation, tired of blaming others and targeting an endless series of outside enemies. It no longer worked. People were afraid, all right, but they were afraid of different things. They were afraid of losing their jobs. They were afraid of the economy collapsing. They were afraid of getting sick, because if you got sick in the United States of America, you were likely to be in trouble because you didn't have health insurance that would meet your needs. They were tired of the possibility of making the earth uninhabitable and fearful that it would be uninhabitable for future generations. And they were fearful for their loved ones that returned from an endless series of wars with deep emotional, psychological, and physical problems. Second, historians point to how people made connections. They made connections between the outlandish and counterproductive military spending and all the unmet needs around them. As the economic crisis deepened, people realized it was best understood in the context of disastrous wars, excessive military spending, and failed foreign policies that were linked to a role in the world that no other country in the world wanted the United States to play. Living standards were declining for most Americans, and most Americans came to understand that that was so because the United States was spending half of the world's military expenditures. This deepening awareness, along with the deepening economic crisis, galvanized a broad citizen-based movement. It pushed the Obama administration to launch several important initiatives. U.S. foreign policy was guided by a different set of insights. First, that there were no military solutions to most problems. Second, that our future depended upon global partnerships, not unilateral action. Third, there were to be no more double standards. Fourth, solving pressing problems required freeing resources from the military sector. And finally, that security was really linked to the ecological health of the planet and to a sustainable economy. So in 2011, with the citizen movement in place, the Obama administration finally abandoned the so-called missile defense shield. This improved relations with Russia and China immediately, and it opened up the possibility and the actuality of further negotiations with Russia and China that in 2012 resulted in all three nations significantly reducing their nuclear arsenals. That, in turn, led to further negotiations involving all nuclear states that concluded in the 2020 comprehensive ban on all nuclear weapons. Now, I remember that year, 2020, really well, because that was also the year the Supreme Court decided that Al Franken had won the 2008 election by one vote.